From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson with you. In the spotlight today, the just-released Kansas Net Farm Income Report for 2020 from the Kansas Farm Management Association out of K-State. We'll be joined by the association's Kevin Herbel, along with 6 of the association's area economists: Jordan Steele, Lindsay Bryant, Bob Kohman, Clay Simons, Craig Althauser, and Dillon Rapp. We'll discuss with them the lead factors that influenced net farm income for the state and for the 6 KFMA regions. Later this week's horticulture segment from Shawnee County Extension, Ariel Whitely Noll will talk about Xeriscaping, the topic she'll be addressing during the next K-State Garden Hour webinar. All that ahead on this Agriculture Today.
Agriculture and food systems are the main drivers of the Kansas economy, but must be improved in order to feed the world's growing population. How are we going to do so? Reduce food loss, find ways to preserve grasslands, and help families stretch their dollars. Global food systems is one of the 5 grand challenges K-State Research and Extension is addressing. To learn more, visit www.ksre.ksu.edu.
You are tuned in to Agriculture Today. As always, we're glad to have you aboard. Well, each year, the Kansas Farm Management Association out of Kansas State University draws from the mass of financial numbers that its farmer members provide as part of the association's operation in the form of the annual Kansas Net Farm Income Report. Well, the new numbers are just now out, and we want to get into those, what they say about the state of the farm economy in Kansas, and not only broadly, but region by region around the state. We're joined by the executive director of the Kansas Farm Management Association, Kevin Herbel, and 6 of the economists serving the various areas for the association around the state. We'll introduce them individually in just a moment. Kevin, good to have you aboard for this roundtable dialogue once again. And looking at the numbers, the net farm income summary for 2020, a year of decent commodity prices and healthy government payments. That seems to be well reflected in this report.
Certainly, Eric, that's reflected in this report and reflected as we end the year. If we think of the year as a whole, very much a roller coaster ride of many twists and turns and ups and downs, and certainly even looking at points in time earlier in the year when the COVID pandemic began, the market disruptions taking place. There was a point in time during 2020 where we wondered what these numbers might look like at the end of the year to the low end, and things turned out quite different. Many decisions made at the point in time of the pandemic and the market disruptions to have some of those government payment, the dollar flow related to the COVID items to go to farms in the state and the country, and those factors certainly affected and helped to pull many operations through some parts of the year. But when it's all said and done, the price changes here as we come to the end of the year, the yields that happened in many places around the state, all of those working together to make an overall fairly positive picture when we look at the final numbers. Certainly depending what type of producer you are, what is your farm type, what it is that you raise. Livestock production maybe not feeling the same as what some of our crop producers do in the midst of these circumstances.
Well, the first number that most folks are interested in would be the average net farm income in Kansas, this time for 2020, of course. What is that number, Kevin?
Well, Eric, that number comes in this year just under $168,000 at $167,894. And certainly in this year, even where we had some of the COVID-related payments, big player in where that was at. And in total, that close to 168,000 number is made up of just over 67% in total government payments. And if we kind of pull out from those total government payments, just the ones that you might say are COVID-related, to explain a little bit what we're referencing there, there were the CFAP payments that came out, CFAP 1 and 2, during the year, as well as PPP loans and forgiveness of those loans, as well as any idle grants received by farms. Those pieces are what we pulled together and we'll call the COVID-related payments. That amounted to about 45% of that net farm income. And if we pulled those COVID-related payments out of that 168,000 net farm income, the net farm income would have been at the state level about 92,000.
Well, Kevin, we do want to ask you briefly for your thoughts on the regional differences before we go to the individual economists representing those regions around the state. You look across the numbers there. What do you see?
Well, we certainly have a lot of variation, just like we do every year, and much of that variation certainly being tied to how much livestock production versus crop production in certain regions played a big role within that. But yields were probably the major thing to impact between the different regions. And we did have, if we look at net crop insurance payments, 3 of our associations had a positive net crop insurance, which would indicate that they had more crop insurance receipts than what they paid in crop insurance premiums, and 3 associations that had a negative net crop insurance, so they paid more premiums than they received in receipts. But those areas with the positive net crop insurance certainly going to be more impacted by yields that were down relative to what would be considered average yields in the areas. Those pieces fitting together toward the northwestern part of the state being the lowest net income, just under 132,000. Southwest Kansas, which had a large amount of variation just even within the association, but they do come in at the highest net income, a little over 233,000. And then in the middle, north central, southeast in the 170s, north central at just under 174, southeast at 178. South central, which has the last several years tended toward being the lowest association net income wise, did come in with a 195,000 net farm income in 2020. Impacted a lot by some good fall crop yields, I think, and you'll hear more of that shortly here. And then northeast Kansas at 147,000. Maybe one fact, too, that I would want to point out when we just consider the livestock activities within the state, our overall average value of livestock produced per farm was up about 18,000 in 2020 compared to 2019, going from about 101,000 to just under 120,000. But with that 18,000 increase, there was a little over 31,000 of livestock-related government payments that went to the farms. So more than what that increase was came about because of those government payments, and the greater share of those certainly flowing due to the COVID-related CFAP programs. The family living expense number in 2020 at the state level was right at 91,000. That number was down actually just slightly from what it had been in 2019, where it was 93,600 or so. It actually, we've been running in the 85 to 90,000 level for a number of years. And, you know, what's available to come out of this farm, available to provide for those families that the farm is there to meet the needs of is important.
Well, let's dig a little deeper on a more local level as we go once around the table and visit with the area economists representing the Kansas Farm Management Association around Kansas. And let's start with Northwest Kansas. Jordan Steele, the economist there. Jordan, welcome to you, and just your perceptions on this past year and your farms and ranches enrolled in the KFMA. As Kevin said, the net farm income average for your region, $131,000 and some change. What are your thoughts on this past year, Jordan?
Yeah, Eric, it was a real poor year, actually, is what I would think. As Kevin said, you know, without any assistance, it would have been $17,000 net farm income compared to $130,000. We've been generating about $1 million the last few years as far as value farm production, but we're only keeping $100,000 of that for profits the last few years, and that's, although it's pretty consistent, it's not real great. The biggest driver of our factors this year was the crop production or lack thereof, I would say. Our eastern counties in our association had good yields, but our western side by the Colorado border and over here in Thomas County where we're at, we only had 60 bushel corn and milo. And so the last 4 years or so, we've had 100 plus bushel fall crops. And, you know, we take 30 bushels at $4 and over a couple thousand acres. That gives us $100,000 that we missed out on there. So we could have had a real boomer of a year if we would have caught a few more rains, but we had some areas that were dry all year long. And in fact, we're still in the drought monitor on the yellow and the brown on some parts of our areas. So the biggest driver for us was simply just not having bushels to sell.
To follow up on that, it sounds as if crop insurance isn't making your producers even close to whole.
Well, I think the crop insurance, it keeps them in business. You know, if we take those out, they still break even. Also, with that 60 bushel corn and milo, that's right at our crop insurance level. So we still had full production cost and only a partial product to sell, and yet our premiums and our receipts really just kind of broke even on themselves. So it lets us play for another year, but doesn't replace lost revenues, I think, is where we're at. You know, sometimes it would have maybe been better if we only had a 20 or a 40 bushel crop. That way we could have collected on some crop insurance and reduced some of our input costs.
Then, Jordan, how is 2021 shaping up? Can your producers do more than tread water here in 21 as opposed to 2020?
You know, I think so. Hopefully, crop prices are, like you said, right now historically high. $7 commodities, wheat, corn, and milo here, cash price. If we can raise the bushels, I think we'll be okay. We did get a half inch of rain yesterday, so that'll help a little bit. But our western side is still pretty dry, more than just a seasonal dry. So the wheat is looking okay. Hopefully this little rain will help finish it out and get some more moisture without hail coming up here in May would be nice. But we'll have to see how corn and milo goes in. I know my coworker, Mark Wood, did a presentation earlier and looked at some of our break-even costs too. And so he actually thought that we might get some more soybeans planted out here in our part of the world. So we'll have to see what producers put in the ground.
Right. Jordan, thank you. Jordan Steele, one of the farm economists serving the Kansas Farm Management Association in northwest Kansas. Now we'll continue with our visit with the 6 economists with the association representing the different regions in the state, getting some feedback from them on the net farm income numbers from 2020. As for the story in southwest Kansas, we'll go to KFMA economist there, Lindsay Bryant now. So, Lindsay, as Kevin noted earlier, southwest Kansas came in with the top average net farm income amongst all of the 6 regions in the state, just north of $233,000. So a good year for your producers, as it reads on paper anyway.
Yeah, I think this is the second year in a row now that we've come in at the top. So, yeah, just at around $230,000 this year. Of that, 57% of that is government payments, with 29% of that being COVID-related payments. But aside from government payments, we still had around $100,000 net farm income. So kind of to explain that additional income, you know, we kind of had one extreme to the other across our association. So as with Jordan's, western counties, ours too were extremely dry. So there was severe drought that away with low yields and some struggling farmers out that way. But the further east you moved, we had some exceptional yields, and with the good price, that's kind of what led into that additional net farm income. Just kind of a combination of government payments, yield, and price that led into that. We also did have some spotty hail damage throughout the association that really affected some people.
This year, as we move forward throughout 2021 then, how are things shaping up, do you think? It's somewhat similar in respect to rainfall that you've received in southwest Kansas. The haves and have-nots exist. How is it shaping up in your view?
As far as attitudes going in with my members, I think that's looking pretty promising with the price and just their overall confidence and attitudes right now. It was pretty dry there for a while, but we have been getting some decent rain here lately, which is promising. The West is still, like Jordan said, just going to face that exceptionally dry spell that they've had that's going to continue to affect them. But I think things are looking okay so far.
Ask you this before we move on. Is there any chance that your producers might become too comfortable with the market prices that they're seeing? And
I don't think so. The amount of volatility that they face all the time, I don't think that they're ever comfortable. So,
Lindsay, thank you. Lindsay Bryant in the southwest part of Kansas for the Kansas Farm Management Association. We will turn to the north central part of the state. Bob Kohman with us, economist in that region of Kansas. And to point out once again the average net farm income, Bob, in your region, north central Kansas, just shy of $174,000. A good percentage of that was, again, government payments this past year. So size up how things are in your region.
Well, yeah, we were pleasantly surprised with how the year turned out through a lot of uncertainty. $174,000 of net farm income was, to my knowledge, a record for north central Kansas and for KFMA data. The previous high was $148,000 back in 2011. So it was a very, very good year, about $70,000 higher than what we had in 2019. So the long and the short of it, just a really good year for our producers. Government payments did play a role in that. We had 62% of our income was from government payments. But, we did have a lot of exceptional yields, primarily in our fall crops. Our corn averaged 145 bushel to the acre across our association. And I look back through the 2015 to 2019 yields, and we were running at an average of 112 bushel to the acre. So a jump of 33 bushel to the acre. Prices were also up. We sold our corn for an average of $3.84 per bushel, and in the previous years we were running at $3.22. So when you put an additional 30 bushel and some 60 cents on the price, that really helped that enterprise that had been kind of lagging in our area for a number of years. Milo was actually our best enterprise from a profitability standpoint, followed by soybeans and then wheat, but they were all profitable at different levels, thankfully to some very good yields.
Always good to hear. As we speak of your area, to remind folks, you have substantial cow-calf operation presence in north central Kansas. How are those enterprises faring in your view?
Well, it was mostly steady as she goes from a cow-calf enterprise standpoint this year. The bottom line profitability numbers were very similar. I think we were within like $10 ahead from net return to management as we had been in previous years. Our cow-calf sector and our backgrounding guys took it on the chin when COVID came in. Cattle markets did a pretty major downturn. So what propped those up was our government payments. I was looking at our backgrounding enterprise. Our average, we had 22 farms that provided us with information for backgrounding. The average government payments on those was $89,000 per farm on an average of just a little over 1,000 heads. So it came out to $83 per head. And so that really helped heal those guys up a little bit. And I know the cow-calf sector was somewhat the same way. We had some pretty significant contributions there from government payments to help keep those guys' head above water. But otherwise the cow-calf enterprise was pretty much a pretty standard year by our standards.
Then same question to you on 2021's prospects with, again, extraordinarily strong grain prices, and cattle prices are holding their own. Feed costs are pretty high, though. How are things appearing to you for your producers?
Well, yeah, I think you've pretty well hit it on the head. Our feed prices are not going in the right direction from a profitability standpoint for our backgrounders, which is a pretty big, large part. We have a lot of those guys that are involved in that enterprise, so that's obviously a concern. The commodity prices from a crop side are leading to a lot of optimism. It's been fun getting out and doing spring visits and meeting, sitting across the table from our producers, and there's smiles on people's faces. We did get some rain last week, so our wheat crop is looking up. I think we've got excellent potential in our area. I guess the other area of concern for us would be our input prices. Fertilizer prices have increased, fuel prices are going up, so we're going to have to be making some adjustments in our budgets to adjust for cost of production from that standpoint. But overall, we're feeling pretty optimistic at the moment.
Very good. Bob, thanks. Bob Kohman, Kansas Farm Management Association economist based in north central Kansas. We're talking now with Clay Simons, who is based in the south central part of Kansas for the KFMA. And Clay, as we heard from Kevin earlier in his overall summary of the area numbers, it sure sounded like south central Kansas made a nice comeback in 2020.
Oh, goodness, Eric. Yes, it is. I mean, our net farm income for this year was a little over $195,000. From a historical perspective, as far as net farm income, when you compare it to other regions across the state, year in and year out, we're generally, kind of in the bottom two as far as regions go. And to be kind of in the upper half this year, as far as that goes, has really been good for us. Of course, government payments helped us quite a bit. 43% of our net farm income was from government payments, whereas the previous year, if we wouldn't have had government payments, we wouldn't have had a profit because we had 110% of our income was government payments. But what's really helped us in our area as far as crop production goes, we had pretty decent wheat yields, but the fall crop yields, especially soybeans and milo, were just tremendous last year. If you went back and looked at what our typical farm was grossing per crop acre in 2020, that was just under $454 an acre, where in 2019 it was $398. So we're talking an extra $55, $56 an acre, predominantly driven by fall crop yields. That's not something that we get every year. You don't get the timely rains like we got, and you just don't get the yields, and we don't get the rainfall some regions get, and we've got some irrigation, but not as much as other regions do. And so it was just kind of a perfect storm for us, Eric.
Yeah. 2021 then, hopefully an extension of the same that we saw in 2020 in South Central Kansas?
Well, right now, I mean, we can be pretty hopeful. We've had some rains, moisture's in pretty decent shape. Guys are getting fall crops planted and in. And so, if we get some timely rains and some decent yields at these prices, things should still look up for us. I mean, input prices, like Bob alluded to, they are going to be a squeeze on some guys. Fertilizer certainly does cost more than it was. The guys that went ahead and prepaid some fertilizer before the end of the year are a little ahead of the curve compared to guys that were buying it after the first of the year. But I guess we shouldn't be too surprised by that increase in input prices, because it seems like whenever you have really good commodity prices, those suppliers do tend to find a way to capture some of that.
Clay, thank you. We've talked with 4 of the area economists representing the KFMA regions around the state out of the 6 regions, so we've 2 more to bring into the conversation, including Craig Althauser, area economist for the KFMA in Northeast Kansas. And Craig, a similar refrain to that of several of the other areas in that you saw a notable jump in net farm income from 2019 to 2020.
Yes, we did, and it was nice to see, especially when we think about where we came from and what the outlook was about a year ago at this time, even on into July of last year, and how much pessimism there was out there. And it's incredible to think how much has changed since then. Our net farm income per farm in Northeast Kansas was $147,000 last year, up from about $103,000 the year before. Good yields. It's just amazing how much changed since August. A lot of the growth, I should say some of the growth in net farm income was certainly due to increased government payments, especially the COVID-related payments. However, our sort of more traditional government payments were actually lower in 20 than they were in 19, the ARC and PLC payments. But no question, our government payments averaged about $80,000 per farm. As a percentage, though, of net farm income, that was actually lower for us in Northeast than it was the 2 prior years. So it's nice to see that in combination with a rise in overall net farm income.
Better productivity, solid prices. Again, anything else that your producers might have been doing in that area coming off of 2019, which was a little more strapped in terms of economics?
Well, we did notice a couple things, more balance sheet based measurements. The farms decreased their debt load by an average of about 2% per farm, which was nice to see. And machinery costs on a per acre basis in Northeast Kansas we've seen them plateau now for the last 5 years or so. following a really, really significant and rapid increase in machinery costs per acre, maybe from 2010 to 2015. But since then, they've really plateaued, and those machinery costs per acre have not really risen anymore. And that's been welcome to see as kind of a cost control and efficiency measure.
Well, so much of the Northeast, not all of it, but a fair percentage of it, is corn and soybean country. You look at the markets currently, and you have to be enthused about the prospects as we get through 2021.
Absolutely. And we have moisture. Spring plantings seem to proceed pretty good. Certainly no major problems there, which is nice to see. Get it in the ground, and we have excellent prices. So we're encouraging people to look at pricing opportunities already. There's a lot of optimism out there. And so the outlook for us in Northeast Kansas is certainly very positive at this point for 2021. Could be a challenge for some of the livestock producers, obviously, but from the crop standpoint, it looks very, very promising.
Craig, appreciate the input there. Craig Althauser, Northeast Kansas economist for the Kansas Farm Management Association. And to conclude our roundtable and getting input from the area economists, we'll hear about the year just passed in southeast Kansas. And Dillon Rapp is one of the economists for the Kansas Farm Management Association in that part of the state. So Dillon, looking at the numbers, southeast Kansas posted the third largest net farm income average of the 6 regions in 2020. So obviously good crop production and good returns to crop production had something to do with that.
Yeah, Eric, it was a combination of several factors that led to our increase in net farm income. It was roughly a 60% increase from what our net farm income level was in 2019. I do want to drive home a point that Craig brought up a second ago, and that's that it was not that long ago, right at a year from this time, some of the faculty in the Ag Econ department were projecting an 80 to 90% drop in net farm income. So just as we're summarizing what all has been said today, I think it's interesting to look back and see how quickly things turned in the last half of 2020. But back to our numbers, we also had a pretty good chunk of our net income from government payments. It was about 67%, and that was right on track with the percentage of net income that was from government payments in 2019 with what we had in the MFP program in 2019. And I do want to point out that within the farms within our association, we have quite a bit of variability, like what Kevin was speaking to earlier. About 10% of our farms had net incomes of over $500,000. So having those farms on the right-hand side of the distribution really drives up the average. About 45% of our farms had net incomes between $0 and $100,000. So the $177,000 number is definitely an increase and definitely a good year, but there is a lot of variability within those figures.
Need to take everything in context. Then what's your outlook for your producers in southeast Kansas for 2021 when it's all said and done?
We're pretty optimistic in southeast Kansas with obviously the way the prices are. Our wheat looks pretty decent. We've had good moisture this year as opposed to kind of an excessive amount of moisture that we've had for the last 2 or 3 years. So that's also helped with getting our fall crops started in the ground. A lot of corn's been planted, good moisture for that, and we'll be rolling into soybeans here pretty soon. Just a lot of optimism and hopeful for what the summer and the fall might bring.
Indeed. Dillon, we appreciate your comments as well. Many thanks. Dillon Rapp, area economist for the Farm Management Association in southeast Kansas. As it is every year, this report in its entirety is a treasure trove of information and indicators on the condition of the Kansas farm economy and individual operations and enterprise areas. It's well worth a read, and the executive summary will soon be posted to the agmanager.info website. So have a look at that, agmanager.info. And all, we appreciate your input. Thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast. From the Kansas Farm Management Association, the executive director of the KFMA, K-State's Kevin Herbel, and area economists from all around the state, Jordan Steele, Lindsay Bryant, Bob Kohman, Clay Simons, Craig Althauser, and Dillon Rapp, lending their observations on the new net farm income summary for 2020 out from the KFMA just this week. We'll be back with more. This is Agriculture Today. Legal and financial concerns surround the day-to-day management of the agricultural industry. Producers, ag creditors, and USDA agencies rely on Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services. If you've received an adverse decision from the USDA or have an ag credit concern, call today, 800-321-3276, or visit us online, Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services, exploring options, generating solutions. Next up for you on Agriculture Today, it's our weekly segment on horticultural matters. As we've been telling you regularly here, K-State Research and Extension is hosting an ongoing series of K-State Garden Hours covering a wide gamut of lawn, garden, and associated topics. And the series continues with a session this coming Wednesday, May the 19th, over the noon hour. And the select topic this next time around will be Xeriscaping. To explain what that is, the Garden Hour presenter upcoming, she is Ariel Whitely Noll, the Shawnee County Extension horticulture agent. Ariel, xeriscaping has to do with our occasional dry weather in these parts.
Absolutely. So xeriscape gardening is really just planning out your landscape or planning your garden with water in mind. And the reality, unfortunately, in Kansas is that many times we don't have enough of it. So xeriscape gardening is just about planning your garden around those occasional times that we don't have enough water so that your plants can still thrive and be beautiful.
When folks hear about that, they often have the notion that one can't really, say, create an attractive landscape with an absence of water or with very low water access. But that's just not the case, is it?
It isn't, and you're absolutely right. I think so many times when I talk to people about low water use gardening or xeriscape gardening, they think cacti, and that's all we're going to be able to have, maybe a couple tumbleweeds. But I plan to show in my program just how beautiful xeriscape gardens can be. We have a great example here at the Shawnee County Extension office, and I have tons of photos and great plant examples to show people that a xeriscape garden can have blooms year-round and just be a wonderful, beautiful showcase garden that at a glance most people wouldn't realize had very little water going into it.
Obviously, this is all about plant selection, or a large part of it anyway. So what does one use as guidelines there, Ariel?
We're going to go over a lot of K-State's resources. We have a wonderful website called Kansas Roots, and that really combines so many of our publications with recommended plants all in one spot where a user can have their phone, be in a nursery, and pull up K-State's list and find some recommended plants. We're going to go over a couple that are specific on xeriscape as well, and native plants because so many of them are adapted to our area. But there are so many great resources that K-State has that'll point people in the right direction for those recommended plants that need very little water.
Well, to further illustrate xeriscaping, you might pass along an example or two of water-saving plant material that would work for this purpose.
Absolutely. There's so many great options, and in my program I plan to talk about statement flowers and shrubs and trees, but I was actually just looking at the staghorn sumac, and that's one of my favorite examples because it's kind of an oddly shaped shrub, a little bit of a vase shape, but very drought tolerant, very readily establishes, and in the late summer to early fall, it just has an incredible sort of orange to red color that I just don't think you see a lot in our shrubs outside of maybe the burning bush. And so I think it's a really wonderful feature plant that I'm excited to talk more about next week.
There are, beyond ornamental shrubs, though, trees, ornamental flowers, many alternatives there that folks can look at, are there not?
Yes, absolutely. I'm actually having a little bit of a difficult time limiting it down, but we're going to talk about some ground covers like candy tuft and rock soapwort. We're going to talk about a lot of feature flowers, especially our bulbs like allium and iris, and then also go into a couple of the trees, some native and some non-native, that have been very well adapted to our area, like our own redbud that's so often overlooked.
Is part of this as well, Ariel, the plant layout itself, so you don't have plant material competing with neighboring plant materials so aggressively for limited water resources?
Absolutely, and that's going to be the first part of the program, is just talking about how to lay out that landscape. As we know, mulch is always very important, providing a little bit of shade so that that summer heat isn't quite so intense on your xeriscape garden, but also just placement and layout so it's beautiful, but also to protect our plants a little bit from the elements so that they can withstand periods of drought a little bit better.
What other keys to success would one want to consider here in xeriscaping?
I think the most important thing to consider, outside of course, plant selection and placement, which we've already discussed, is making sure that people understand that all plants do need water. And so even in a xeriscape garden, that first year for our perennial plants and the first 3 to 5 years for our trees and our woody shrubs, they actually do need some water to become established. And then once they're established in the landscape, most years they can live just on rainfall alone. But we're going to discuss making sure you have your soil test, that you have the nutrients and the water your plant needs in those first couple of years so that your long-term landscape will be healthier and overall will need fewer inputs.
It's an idea that could apply to a lot of folks, in fact, those who may have just the occasional droughty weather. These approaches can still work in those situations as well in an attractive way for gardeners.
Absolutely. There's really nobody that couldn't have a xeriscape garden. Whether you have, maybe in the western parts of the state, very, very little water, especially in the summertime, or if you're fortunate to have a decent amount. I think the southeastern part of Kansas tends to get a little bit more, at least it has the last couple of years. But either way, this can be a great way to establish a beautiful garden, but not have to spend every day out there with a garden hose trying to keep everything alive, but rather to let the plants care for themselves.
Well, it's a proven technique in dealing with low water availability over the long pull in designing a landscape. And tell us about the Garden Hour presentation then, how folks can take part in it, Ariel.
If you look up Kansas Garden Hour, it's going to be the first link that pops up. That's a great spot to register. And you want to make sure to register because this year, when you register for one Garden Hour, we're going to email you for the whole rest of the series. It's also great to be on that website because you can go back and look at all of our previous topics which have been recorded and posted. You can also find all of this information on our social media pages. The K-State Research and Extension Facebook page has all the information about all of our garden hours for people to join.
It's as easy as searching for K-State Garden Hour, and you're urging folks to bring their questions, for it's fully interactive.
Absolutely. I think we all have left a good amount of time at the end of the program. We love to get questions, especially as varied as they are. We have had so many people joining us for Garden Hour, so I'm highly looking forward to everyone coming and seeing what kind of questions they have about xeriscape gardening.
Again, that is the featured topic this next time around, xeriscaping, landscaping with less water. And looking forward to it, Ariel. Thanks for the brief preview right here.
Thank you so much.
She's the Shawnee County Extension horticulture agent, Ariel Whitely Noll, and she'll be the presenter during the K-State Garden Hour over the noon hour on Wednesday, May the 19th. Go to K-State Garden Hour for more information on how to take part. That's this week's horticulture segment for you. And our time is away. Thanks for tuning in. Eric Atkinson for Agriculture Today over the K-State Radio Network.